Astarion, the vampire rogue from Baldur's Gate 3, is a character who has become near and dear to so many. Today we're diving deep into this charming rogue, and I challenge you to watch this video and find something that you've never heard of before. Hello ladies, men, and non-binary friends. I'm back from the grave with a vengeance. This video game has awoken me from my glorious slumber, and I can't get this pesky lad out of my head. This video will essentially be an info dump of all the information I've binged on this character in the past few months. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. For those that don't know, an Iceberg video starts at the very top with common knowledge and gets more obscure the deeper we go. So let's start at the top. Did you know that Astarion's performance and mannerisms were inspired by a feral cat? In an interview with Dan Allen Gaming, Neil Newbon, Astarion's actor, explained that Astarion's mannerisms were inspired by a feral cat near his house.
I use animal work. He's a cat. He's a black cat. There's a stray that comes into my house called Red. We nickname him Red. He's a stray cat, and he's quite feral. It took me 3 years before I could pick him up and hold him. He's totally cool with me now. 3 fucking years.
Wow.
It took me to allow the stray cat to be cool with me.
Shit.
But he gave me a lot of inspiration about Astarion.
Astarion approves when you are affectionate to cats during the game, so it makes sense that he would resemble a cat as well. Despite his charm being a signature aspect of his character, Astarion's charisma stats are quite low, giving him a +0 default score to flat charisma rolls, unless the player decides to change it during a level up. Every fandom has discourse about character sexuality, but the conversation typically goes like this: they're definitely gay. They're definitely straight. Because of the nature of Baldur's Gate 3, where any player can romance any of the companions as either a man, woman, or non-binary person, none of the companion characters are gay or straight. They are canonically bisexual or pansexual or one of any other subcategories within these two larger categories. Astarion is canonically pansexual, as disclosed by the actor who plays him, Neil Newbon, during one of his live streams.
It's really nice to see better representation and choices in roleplay games and things like that, which they can have when you can custom build your character. Like Astarion's pansexual, man, which I really dig.
In this video, you might notice that there is a lot of mention of Astarion's actor, Neil Newbon. Because he's the man that brought Astarion to life, I did find it important to keep bringing him up. His involvement in the creation of Astarion and the love that Neil has for him is not only heartwarming to myself and so many, but also reflects just how much of a fan he is of this character and this franchise. Just like us. It wouldn't be an Astarion video if we didn't talk about Gustarion. Gustarion came to life during one of Neil Newbon's Twitch streams where his community manager, Blue Owl's Medic, asked Neil, well, I'm just going to insert the clip here.
I like this question by Veronica. Out of all of your characters, which character do you think would be a very chaotic goose?
Can you imagine Goose Astarion? Gustarion. Oh, honk. Honk, my name's Gustarion. Honk. Is that your sandwich? Not anymore. It's pronounced honk.
Gustarion became a vivid aspect within the fandom lore of the character. I can't go more than a few days without seeing a new animatic from talented artists.
Wow! I gotta show Tom. Something's happening. I'm entirely sure what it is, Tom. Fucking Gustarion, man! It's fucking Gustarion. It's real! Oh my god, it's attacking! It's gonna look like a knife. Love you. Wow, that's amazing. It's so cool. Brilliant. That's amazing. What the fuck is this? What's that man behind me? It's touching my back. Hello, darling. Hello, darling.
Neil Newbon is a prolific actor in the gaming community and has played iconic characters like Carl Heisenberg in Resident Evil Village and Gavin Reed in Detroit Become Human. He performed the voice and motion capture for Astarion and also directed a number of other companion characters, including our favorite heartless tiefling from hell, Karlach, played by Samantha Bayard. He's currently doing a multiplayer playthrough with his friend Tom DeVille, a scriptwriter, and they stream pretty regularly on Neil's Twitch, link in the description. Neil has incorporated some of Astarion's chaos into his playthroughs, which makes them incredibly entertaining to watch. He also does signings where he performs lines in Astarion's voice, and he will often share anecdotes about his work on Baldur's Gate 3 and the character Astarion. It's refreshing to see an actor who is not only passionate about their work and invested in the franchise it's from, but also embraces the fandom response as well. If you've made it to Act 2 of Baldur's Gate 3, hopefully you've been able to come across a bar called the Waning Moon just outside of Moonrise Towers. Inside, there is a ban list, including a number of people who are no longer allowed at that bar, one of which is described as an unknown elf with pale skin and a snide mouth, referring to the master distiller as the porcine publican. The writers have confirmed that this is indeed our favorite pale elf, Astarion. You might be aware that Astarion's underwear is embroidered with a cheeky phrase befitting of the elf's humor, embroidered into the cloth. If you're reading this, you managed to bed me or behead me. Either way, you got lucky. But you might not know what was previously embroidered on his shirt. Clearly no stranger to a needle and thread, Astarion has embroidered the words of a poem on his shirt. It reads, "Lamentable is the autumn picker content with plums." It seems that this was removed from the game via updates, much to the despair of us. God damn it, I can't say it. It seems that this was removed from the game via updates, much to the despair of many Astarion fans who felt the quote suited him. Plums are typically a summer fruit, so if you're an autumn fruit picker harvesting plums, you're impatient and could be holding out for something much better if you give it a little time. This quote is incredibly sad, since Astarion was waiting for 200 years before he was free from Cazador's grasp. But he did get something better, eventually. Stars and Clouds on Tumblr finished the non-existent poem, seemingly from Astarion's perspective, and it's beautiful. Lamentable is the autumn picker content with plums. Lamentable are the humble who settle for breadcrumbs. Lamentable is the contentment of just surviving. Living is not the same as the refusal of dying. Lamentable is the satisfaction from bare necessities. Abundance is still less than infinities. Lamentable are the frugal who save every penny. How dare you not have it all, when most don't have any? And lamentable am I, most of all, for being so weak, for screaming the sweetest yet unable to speak, for wanting more than what I was handed, for having less than I demanded, for wanting the stars and the warmth of the sun, even if my flesh they may burn. Better to die of gluttony than to live on crumbs. Better to die picking poisoned apples than rotting plums. God damn, this fandom is talented. Neil Newbon made a playlist to get in the right mindset before his recording sessions for Astarion. It's over 10 hours long, with 147 songs and almost 50,000 likes. Previously just called Astarion, now called Neil Work A. During the game, you can gain a lot of approval points for Astarion for killing the Gur, or monster hunter, that is tasked with bringing Astarion back to Baldur's Gate. Upon doing so, he'll reveal to you that this isn't the first time he's had a run-in with them. Before he was a vampire, he was a magistrate in Baldur's Gate, and he handed down a ruling against a group of Gur who later ambushed him and beat him within an inch of his life. Cazador then offered to save Astarion and give him the gift of eternal life, or let him bleed out on the street. Astarion chose the former option, became a vampire spawn, and served Cazador against his own will for 200 years. On Cazador's commands, Astarion was forced to capture the Gur camp's children and bring them back to the palace. They were turned into vampire spawn by Cazador, and shortly after, depending on your playthrough, either destroyed or set free by Astarion. Needless to say, his relationship with Gur is complicated.
Well, I mean, kind of. It's a long story, honestly.
Astarion enjoys watching the player receive Leviatar's blessing from the priest at the Goblin camp in Act 1. This condition has some incredible benefits, but it's certainly not for the lighthearted.
Your voice sounds so sweet, dear one. Keep going.
Astarion is incredibly encouraging when the opportunity presents itself to the player.
I must see this. Don't you dare say no. Oh, bravo! Encore. My. Who knew our friend had so much blood in them?
Try not to lick your lips as you say that.
It was a fine strike. Excellent form.
Getting a killer buff from a kinky priest and Astarion approval? What more can you ask for? If you've made it this far and you want to support a queer creator who actually cites her sources, please subscribe. Leave a comment if you learned something new and like the video to feed the algorithm beast. Thank you. The actors playing companion characters recorded the voice and motion capture for the majority of the content within Baldur's Gate 3, save for a select few, specifically the sex scenes. Yes, some of the most sought-after scenes in Baldur's Gate 3 were not actually performed by the original actors of our favorite characters. Those scenes were actually one of the 8 Tav actors. Josh Wishard, who performed the voice of Tav 1,
What's done is done. We should check the corpses for valuables.
is responsible not only for Astarion's sex scenes, but the Emperor's, the infamous bear scene, and more. This came out after a number of Astarion fans fawned over, quote, Astarion's leg thing in the post-unascended Astarion sex scene, and he took to TikTok to give Baldur's Gate fans insight on his work. He's quite active on his TikTok channel and streams regularly on Twitch as well. While the High Rollers one-shot may not be completely canonical, the Baldur's Gate 3 fandom has embraced it as such. There are a few standout Astarion moments that may or may not be canon, but are fun and well represented and appreciated in the fandom. After a terrible opening roll from Astarion, a 5 on perception, Astarion becomes transfixed by Gale's boots instead of the task at hand, i.e. figuring out what's wrong with Tav. This becomes a running joke throughout the rest of the one-shot, as Astarion, and other players, admire Gale's magnificent boots on less than stellar rolls.
That's 3, that is 5.
5 total.
5 total.
Oh.
I have a thing for this.
Yeah, please, yeah.
So I start looking surreptitiously around. I notice Gale's boots. I go, because he's doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
So he's hoiked up his clothes a little bit. And I realise they're really nice.
They're very nice.
I get a little transfixed with his boots.
Okay, yeah.
To the point where I can't quite look away from them.
The stitching is exquisite, you know, it's double stitched.
Exquisite.
Cost a fortune.
It cost a fortune.
Neil has disclosed that he's a huge fan of D&D, and was able to recognize the hints that the captured drow adventurer in the High Rollers campaign was actually Driz Durden. Driz Durden is a male drow ranger, originally from the Underdark, and became a legendary hero of the North. His weapons of choice are 2 scimitars, nicknamed Twinkle and Icing Death. He also has a Black Panther companion, Gwen Huivar. Neil was incredibly excited at this inclusion, inadvertently making Astarion into a Driz Durden fanboy.
Rune system, and then you see the dome with the drow elf.
I'm going to shriek as loudly as I can and point and go, oh my god, you're Trizidon!
And then you see the dome with the drow elf.
I'm going to shriek as loudly as I can and point and go, oh my god, you're Trizidon! Sorry. Big fan. When you do, I'm going to proceed to ask him as many fan-person questions
Yeah,
about his
absolutely.
adventures
Yeah.
and all that stuff as possible until somebody interrupts me.
Not now, Astarion.
He has the patience of a saint. He answers everyone. He asks all about you. It's very back and forth. You know, it's very. You're like, we're best friends. Like,
I'm convinced now
Yeah,
he's my best friend.
yeah, absolutely.
And he knows me better than
and then,
anyone.
yes.
After the release of Baldur's Gate 3, the popularity of Astarion and subsequently Neil Newbon skyrocketed, leading to an influx of users to Neil Newbon's Discord server, so many, in fact, that they actually had to close the server to get more mods to accommodate for the amount of new members. Neil Newbon's Discord, called The Vagabonds, is sitting at over 17,000 members at the filming of this video. Streamily is a site where fans can order signed prints from their favorite performers. As a Christmas present, I decided to order an Astarion print signed by Neil Newbon for my sister, and the minute it was announced in the Discord that they were open again, I jumped to Streamily to place an order, and there were so many people trying to get a signed print that the site literally crashed the first 4 times I got on it. Neil Newbon's community manager, Blue Owlsmatic, made an announcement in the Vagabonds Discord. We may have broken the site. GG chat. Neil will very likely be doing more in the future as well, so please don't fret if this time you're unable to get one. For those wondering, my order did in fact go through just barely before everything else sold out, so yay! After reaching Rivington in Act 3 and entering Frego's Flophouse, you'll come across Astarion's siblings and fellow spawn of Cazador Zar. Petrus, one of his siblings, has been deemed by the fandom as the bargain bin Astarion. This is due to his less charismatic delivery of Astarion's own lines that the player will find familiar if they have romanced him. Thank you to Larkspur on TikTok for making this back-to-back comparison.
Well, hello, beautiful.
God, you're beautiful.
Well, thank goodness we're such good friends, then.
Thank goodness we're all such good, trusting friends, then.
It'll be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I promise.
I promise you a night you'll never forget.
More than 2 months after the initial game release, Larian Studios is still releasing new content, updates, and patches to further enhance the playability of the game for its players, including an epilogue after comments from players requesting some sort of get-together to check in with your companions after the game's story has concluded. If you choose to ascend Astarion, he can appear during the epilogue as his vampire lord self, but can also transform into a cute little bat. The fandom has deemed him Batstarion, and naturally the art has been plentiful and adorable. It has been speculated by fans that despite his sardonic demeanor, if you befriend and or romance Astarion, he actually says thank you more than any other companion in the game with comparable approval levels. I personally have played through Baldur's Gate 6 times with different romance options almost every time. The only other companion I could see rivaling that number of thank yous would be Karlach, but with a game this large that has hundreds of hours of content for each individual character, until there is a thank you compilation for every companion character, we may never know who says it the most. But thank you to Pikajulie Art for this compilation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. By the way. Thank you for helping me. It was very kind. Thank you. All right. Thank you. For what it's worth. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you. Thank you. Yes. This will all be over soon. This is a gift, you know. Thank you. I won't forget it. Thank you. I appreciated that. Good morning. Thank you for not killing me the other night. Well, thank you, darling. You saved me back there. I may not have appreciated it at the time, but I do now. Thank you.
Many fans have said that Dark Urge and Astarion were made for each other. This comes partly from Astarion's similarly dark / morally gray bordering on villainous background to Dirge, as well as the numerous interactions that Astarion gets if you romance him as Dirge, more so than the other companions. One of Larian's writers spoke on this in a Discord server. Baudelaire Welch is Larian's senior narrative designer and was the head writer of the Dark Urge. They provided insight on why Astarion and Dark Urge seem to have many more interactions than the other origin characters. It was me, so thank you. I am the Dark Urge writer, but I worked on writing for Astarion for several months during the crunch. Because I had the opportunity to, I added a lot of extra interactions between the two characters. That's why Astarion gets a bunch of dialogues for the Dark Urge, and none of the other characters do. I'm sure we would have liked to have every character repeatedly check in on Dark Urge, but there wasn't really time or budget for it. I just was working on the two characters at the same time and wanted to squeak in him being super supportive and worried about you throughout the game. Neil absolutely killed it though. I'd totally forgotten I'd added that scene where you try to break up with Astarion because you're worried about endangering him, and he absolutely doesn't let you.
Oh shit. Did I do something wrong? Why? What's changed? I may be guilty of a bit of embellishment here and there, but I'm no liar. When I vowed we'd save you, we will save you. This little adventure of ours has taught me that we can't let our lives be ruled by fear, or else we never really live. I'm not afraid. Not of you. Not of your darkness, and not of our future. Cazador used his tortures to strike terror into me, but I've rarely been more afraid than on the night when I feared Baal had claimed you for good. But I trust you won't kill me. And if you do,
then I've gotten sloppy and probably have it coming. I am. And beautiful. Not enough people mention that. I'm not going anywhere.
But the Neil delivery of those lines have now totally burned that moment into my brain enduringly. He's just so sweet and anxious for you there. Early on in Astarion's journey, if you have medium or high approval, Astarion will let you know that he's forgotten what color his eyes were before his vampiric transition. This is a tender and sad moment, especially if you're romancing him, because Astarion describes it as, quote, another thing he's lost. In an effort to get that back to him, the fandom has made numerous artist renditions of Astarion pre-vampire, and there's been slight discourse, we'll say, about what color they actually were. Neil Newbon, Astarion's actor, and Stephen Rooney, Astarion's head writer, have both said that they have never decided on a color for Astarion's eyes pre-transition.
But people have been asking over and over again, what colour were Astarion's eyes before he turned into a vampire? And I don't know if we need to have an answer. I kind of feel it's better served if people have their headcanon.
Yeah, no, it's very much headcanon. Like,
there we go. That's the official answer, folks. Stop asking.
Yeah.
And it should be whatever the player has decided as their own personal headcanon. Neil has spoken about how one of the many things about Astarion that has stayed with him is his cheeky little giggle.
Part of his, I've actually assimilated part of his laugh by accident.
Yeah.
I do like a high-pitched giggle when I feel incredibly mischievous, or I've done something particularly naughty that in a good way.
Cheeky,
I have his high-pitched giggle. I have now. I started doing it, and it's a part of me, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever quite let go of him.
In a scene only available if you romance and don't ascend Astarion, he will take you to the grave where he was buried before his full vampire transition and subsequent enslavement by Cazador. His first and last name, as well as his original, quote, death date, are written on the gravestone, revealing that Astarion's last name is Encunin, and he was only 39 at the time of his death, extremely young, especially for a high elf who can live as long as 700 years. The gravestone in its entirety reads, Astarion Encunin, 229 to 268 DR. During this scene, he adds the current date, implying that he now has a chance to start his new life again. Deluxe Trash Queen on Tumblr was kind enough to provide this translation, so thank you.
I've been dead on the ground for long enough. It's time to try living again. With everything that life has to offer.
There was an overwhelmingly positive response to Astarion during the early access era of Baldur's Gate 3, before the game's main launch. Fan artists put out all kinds of incredible content, and Larian Studios, apparently by popular demand, released a video on April 1st announcing Astarion's only fangs, which is exactly what it sounds like.
Oh, hello. My, don't you look good enough to eat? You know, I've always been an admirer of the physical form. Necks, ribs, thighs. Don't make me choose a favorite. And speaking of forms, I gather you're something of an expert in mine. Oh, yes, I've seen your art. It's imaginative, but not exactly lifelike. You can do better, darlings. And I think with the right inspiration, you will. That's why I've decided to launch OnlyFangs, your #1 source for exclusive, unrated, vampire spawn content. Come into my world and invite me into yours. I won't bite if you don't. OnlyFangs, coming soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Whatever that means.
If you don't recruit Astarion into your party in Act 1, he comes back later in Act 3 during the Cazador fight as a zombie, meaning Cazador found him, killed him, resurrected him as a zombie, and used him for the ritual. By recruiting Astarion, you literally save his life, and from a fate worse than death. I took a poll on my personal Tumblr to find the most popular ships for Astarion. I acquired over 400 votes, which isn't a ton in the grand scheme of survey, but these were the final results. Astarion and Tav was the most popular ship at 39.4%, followed by Astarion and Dirge at 34.9%. The next highest was Astarion and Will at 7.9%, Astarion and Gale 7.4%, Astarion and Karlak 5.7%, Astarion and Halsin 3.7%, Astarion and Shadowheart 0.7%, and Astarion and Lae'zel at 0.2%. While Astarion has a certain appreciation for every member of the party, he seems to have a special love for Will, the Blade of Frontiers, seeing him in a slightly more romantic type of way than the other companions. This canonical attraction to Will is why I believe the Astarion-Will ship is the most popular companionship in my previous poll, if only by a slight margin.
Will's the sort of prince type I would have once dreamed of marrying. When I was about 13. Oh, Will. It gave you the benefit of the doubt, and it earned him a set of horns. Not that they don't look flattering on him. Almost everything does. They do. Honestly, that man...
It's possible to download the developer notes for the performers and read the context behind the writing of the script. These notes allow performers to know the exact vibes, feel, and meaning behind each line, even if a certain aspect of their character's story had not been revealed to them at the time of filming. There were a few dev notes for Neil that requested him be only slightly horny, implying that perhaps he had been too horny with his line readings in the past. There are multiple signs throughout the game that illustrate just how little Astarion has in terms of personal belongings. We've already discussed his shirt and how, quote, well-loved it is. His outerwear is also described as being continuously and carefully repaired upon further inspection. But with the free cam mod, you can actually see inside Astarion's tent. This unfortunately reveals that Astarion doesn't even sleep on a bedroll. He sleeps on a slab of wood, presumably because that's all he has. There is also a singular rag for a blanket and a ripped graying pillow. There are a few jars of blood next to him as well, but that's pretty much it. The outside is slightly more presentable with more colorful pillows, the infamous mirror, etc., but Astarion's campsite is significantly less furnished than the other companions, which seems purposeful. The polished outer look of his campsite, contrasting with the dark, messy interior, mirrors Astarion's own character. He appears composed, charming, and charismatic to all those around him, but on the inside, there's a darkness, a sadness, and longing for something better. This continues throughout the game, and in the lower city campsite, you can see your companion's laundry hanging overhead their camps. Once again, we see weathered, ripped old rags hanging overhead Astarion, whilst Gale has beautiful pigmented fabrics. These same rags can be found if you check into the Elfsong Tavern, with one thrown over Astarion's bed. The fandom has deemed this single blanket that follows him throughout the game as Astarion's safety blanket. Stephen Rooney, the head writer for Astarion, has been playing D&D for years and was asked his preferred class in an interview with Idle Insights. Rooney said that he naturally gravitates towards the rogue, which coincidentally is the same class that Astarion is.
When you do play just the regular tabletop game, do you have a preferred lineage, a preferred class?
My natural instinct is always to gravitate towards the rogue. If I do that too much, I just end up playing the same person again and again. So I'd like to challenge myself a little bit and try and go for something drastically different from whatever the last character that I was. I'm normally not very good at being spellcasters, so I do enjoy picking a wizard or a sorcerer, or normally something that's a bit more chaotic. Warlock is always good.
Now I find it interesting that we're about to talk a lot about Astarion, who I believe is a rogue.
Now that you mention it, I believe he is, actually. Yeah. It's funny that. But...
Rooney said that he had a clear vision for where Astarion's journey would start and end very early on. And then it, quote, got a little bit muddy in the middle. But he further explained that working his way through that middle was the most challenging, but led to some of the coolest ideas.
I always had a fair sense of what I wanted his story to look like, kind of knowing, okay, he's going to start here, he's going to end here. Those were always pretty clear, and then it got a bit muddy in the middle. Working our way through that stuff in the middle was sometimes very challenging, but it was often kind of where we got our best ideas.
Stephen Rooney stated that there are two very important tenets that need to be represented when writing Astarion. The very core of his character boils down to his appreciation for violence and the darker side of humanity, as well as being really fun and charming. This balance is imperative because too much to one side or another would make Astarion wildly unlikable or too flat and hollow as a character.
Mm-hmm.
What was like one or two of the core things that were the most important about his character that needed to be represented?
It's not really a spoiler to say that when you meet Astarion, the first thing that he does in the game is pull a knife on you. He has a certain appreciation for violence, I guess, a bit of a murdery streak. He's a vampire. He's all about blood, and he's all about kind of darker sides of humanity. So it's important that that's represented in the game. But at the same time, he is really fun. He's really fun to write. He's really fun to have in your party. Those are kind of the two sides. It would be very, very easy to write a character that was very unlikable in Astarion, and we absolutely didn't want to do that. He needs to be charming, and he needs to be someone that you actually want to have around, because you're going to be with this guy for hours and hours. It's a long trek through this game, so you gotta make sure he's engaging. You've got to make sure he's fun.
In the 4 years that Neil Newbon recorded for Astarion, Stephen Rooney did not have the chance to speak to him face to face, not even once. However, the two still remained in contact through writer's notes and email correspondence. Despite the lack of face-to-face time, Stephen said that Neil's performance as Astarion influenced his writing of the character, and vice versa.
Neil was recording this for, I think, about 4 years, and I never spoke directly to him once. We actually had a very good relationship, but everything was little bits of voice context, just being like, do it like this, and then Neil's recordings would come back, and then I would listen to the recordings and be like, oh, this is great, he's doing something interesting with his voice. As I get his voice in my head, then that changes slightly how I write the character, because now I can hear him. And there was a really interesting kind of feedback loop. We were both kind of giving each other this kind of energy, and it was only about a week before the game came out that we're like, this is ridiculous. We need to just have a call and just say hi. We did that a couple of weeks ago.
Rooney describes it as,
it's a really rewarding relationship in a very strange, it's like the weirdest pen pal you've ever had.
Neil incorporated a lot of techniques into his performance as Astarion. In an interview with James Whitbrook, Neil went in depth on the specific techniques and inspiration he took to build the character. I also used other techniques, such as Commedia dell'arte, using Arlecchino as a character archetype. In fact, in the origin menu with Astarion's introduction, I took his bow directly from that. I also like to use music and real-world references when exploring a character. Aspects of his voice and personality, looks and habits and such are based on 3 of my dear friends. His laugh was inspired by an actor I saw in Amadeus, Tom Hulse. I believe that I remembered being fascinated by it as a kid. I also referenced a lot of Jat Malmgren's work on physical movement and Jung's theories for his personality. Neil based Astarion's theatrical mannerisms on a dear friend of his, Reuben Kay, an Australian comedian, whose work you can see here. This next section includes a trigger warning because sexual assault will be discussed. Nothing graphic, but the reality of survivors will be included. And I will include this on screen whenever it's discussed, so you can skip past it if you want. Most, if not all, actors have an attachment to the characters they play, with some hitting closer to home than others. While Astarion and Neil are quite different people, they share a similar history as survivors. The aspect of Astarion's character in particular hit very close to home for Neil. Harvey Randall interviewed Neil Newbon for PC Gamer, and Newbon shared his experience playing Astarion and how it related to his own trauma as a survivor of sexual assault. There's a lot of stuff that came very close to home. As a rule, you have to be careful about where their story is and where your story is, and not to blend the two things together. You can use elements of your life as substitution or personalization, that sort of thing. But you have to avoid anything traumatic that you haven't dealt with, and the method acting rule is, quote, at least 7 years in the past. You also can't judge or protect a character. You're stepping into their shoes. You're holding them, you're hugging the character through their journey, but you aren't there to stop them from fulfilling it. So for me, It was just asking myself, what is the truth of this? His moment. Survivors find a way to survive. If you can get through things like that, you find the joy in the things that you do have in your life. You can create your own life in the way that you want. I think there's something of a survivor in most people. It's how we carry ourselves through that experience and how we treat people afterwards. I think it's really a testament of how people can get through something like that. Sadly, in the real world, not everyone can. Some sadly succumb to their abuse in a myriad of ways. I am a survivor. Something which is private and which I haven't actually shared beyond my closest friends. The details are still and will remain private, but I feel okay to acknowledge it, despite the pain and suffering experienced over the years. My experience drove me to want to find a better version of myself, my life, my craft, and pass that on, to help and champion others as I have been championed by many amazing people. It's made me incredibly grateful for every opportunity I've been given, and I hope I do justice to the people who gave me generosity, understanding, and support when I needed it most. It's not a gimmick. He's not traumatized because it's, quote, just another idea for a character story. This was a very fleshed out, deep, layered observation of a character in trouble and jeopardy, having gone through trauma, and then what they do when they get out of that, and what they can do with their newfound sense of freedom, and what that means to them.
What is it like, you know, the last time you do a session for this character after so many years?
Oh man,
how do you let
I'm gonna
go?
start-
How do you,
I'm gonna start
honestly,
crying. It was pretty heavy. I haven't really let go, I think is the
Yeah.
thing. The character's still very much with me. When I say I put a lot of my work into this, and a lot of my passion into this, I'm not kidding. This character's journey has been absolutely extraordinary, and I can't thank Swen and Larian and Pitstop and Josh Whedon and Jason Martino and all those kind of people, and Stephen Rooney, the writer, enough to say thank you so much for giving me this. Fucking hell, mate. Sorry, for giving me this character. It's allowed me the totality of an acting experience in a project sustained over 4 years. I've made friendships. I've had fun. It's allowed me to sustain myself as an actor. And honestly, man,
You're gonna get me
it's
welling up,
probably-
man,
it's
for the
probably-
first
it's-
time.
Sorry, it's been one of the best games, gifts, and characters I've ever played.
Astarion is such an interesting companion in Baldur's Gate because the player has such a profound influence on the person that he becomes by the end of the game. When I say that, I don't mean the things that happen to him. I mean the player gets to decide who he fundamentally is based on how you interact with Astarion's journey. When you first meet Astarion, there's two parts to him. There's the mask, the charming, witty, feckless hedon who's a dagger-happy self-preservationist. But there's also the deeply insecure, scared man who can't remember what it feels like to be truly loved and thinks he's a monster. As you romance him and learn more about his trauma and accept him for who he is, rather than what he can provide, his true confidence in himself grows, and he relies less on this facade that he has when you first meet him. Many fans have speculated that Astarion was purposefully made the most attractive character and one whose attractiveness you have to see past in order to get a deeper insight into the truth and the real beauty of his character. Astarion's central conflict is his struggle with bodily autonomy, desire for freedom, and his trauma around being used and abused by Cazador. As a player, you can choose to ascend him, exchanging his soul, the very essence of who he is, and yes, his body, for power and sexual gratification. But that's all you get. You don't get the sweet Astarion moments that came with falling in love with him in the first place. He goes full mask, even stronger than when you first met, but every part of him that isn't powerful is seen as weak and shameful. Vulnerability, selflessness, kindness, all shameful. Everyone is beneath him, including you. If you keep him as a spawn, he delves further into his humanity, inviting that vulnerability, showing you the grave he was buried in, a place he's never returned since he became a vampire, and shows that he wants to truly start life again, by your side, as an equal. He admits that you're the only person he's ever truly cared for. This is perhaps why so many die-hard Astarion fans are so opposed to his Ascended ending. I personally think you should explore every aspect of this game that you can, because the amount of work that went into the, quote, evil endings is just as much work as the good endings. And it's still incredible storytelling regardless. I wasn't entirely sure how to close this video. There are plenty of reasons to love Astarion, and really any of the companion characters in Baldur's Gate 3. Hell, I just gave you almost 30 minutes worth of reasons to love him. But I feel like for many, Astarion is so much more than a character. He's a representation of their struggles with bodily autonomy, narcissistic authority figures, and anger at the world. It felt wrong to end this video on a typical outro telling people to subscribe and say something like, "Thanks for watching this Astarion Iceberg." Astarion Ankinen means a lot to people. That's really all there is to it. Most stories that include survivors are, honestly, absolute fucking garbage, and are written by people who frankly don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I've never seen a survivor story like Astarion's, and I'm glad to have it. So instead of ending on something that feels hollow or salesy to feed the dreaded algorithm, I'll just end on Neil.
But one thing I wanted to say is that this character has meant the world to me. He is a survivor. He has gone through trauma. And I've had so many people from the community reach out to me personally, share they identify with many stories and characters in the game. And people have come up to me and said that they felt inspired to deal with their own trauma. As a survivor myself, I understand when they talk to me about it, what they mean. That they feel seen by the game, they feel understood by the characters, and that is a testament to this amazing, beautiful masterpiece that Larian, Swen, the writing team have all put together and created, and to the amazing cast of 248 beautiful actors that put their heart and soul on a daily basis to this. Thank you so much to the community for embracing all of us, and for me particularly, thank you so much indeed. I really appreciate it.